My name is Mike, 32 years old, and 5 years ago I walked away from my toxic family to save my sanity. Since then, I've built a thriving tech company in San Francisco while they believed I was failing. My sister Jessica was so convinced I was lying about my success that she hired a private investigator to expose me as a fraud at our grandmother Eleanor's 80th birthday dinner. She had no idea her plan would backfire so spectacularly. If you've ever had to walk away from toxic family for your own sanity, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe. The moment my sister realized her plan backfired still makes me smile to this day. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, where our family appeared perfectly normal from the outside. My father, William, worked as an account manager at an insurance company, while my mother, Patricia, taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. Our household consisted of my older sister, Jessica, myself, and my younger brother, Ethan. We lived in a 4-bedroom colonial with a neatly trimmed lawn and a golden retriever named Scout. To neighbors and casual acquaintances, we seemed like the ideal American family. Behind closed doors, the reality was vastly different. My father was what therapists call a high-functioning alcoholic. He never missed work and maintained his professional reputation, but at home, he drank bourbon every night until his words slurred and his temper flared. His verbal abuse started subtly backhanded compliments or jokes at my expense, but as I entered my teen years, it evolved into outright criticism and occasional rage-fueled tirades. "You'll never amount to anything with that attitude," became his favorite phrase whenever I expressed an opinion or showed enthusiasm for something that didn't align with his values. My mother, rather than protecting us, became the family's chief enabler. "Your father works very hard to provide for this family," she would say after he'd reduced me to tears. "He doesn't mean what he says when he's stressed." Her approach to family dysfunction was denial, wrapped in a veneer of peacekeeping. Problems weren't addressed. They were swept under the rug in service of maintaining the illusion of harmony. Then there was Jessica, 3 years my senior and the undisputed golden child. She learned early how to navigate our father's moods and my mother's denial. Jessica discovered that joining in my father's criticism of me, or my younger brother Ethan, would earn her praise and protection. She became skilled at twisting situations to her advantage, making herself look good at our expense. "Mike was just jealous because I got better grades," she would explain when my parents questioned why I was upset. In reality, she had sabotaged my science project the night before it was due. Our extended family remained largely unaware of these dynamics. During holiday gatherings at my grandmother Eleanor's house, we performed the role of happy family with practiced precision. My father limited his drinking to maintain appearances. My mother orchestrated conversations to highlight Jessica's achievements, and we all smiled for photos that would later be displayed on mantels and in photo albums, preserving the fiction of our family happiness. The pattern of favoritism was established early and reinforced consistently. When Jessica made the volleyball team, my parents attended every game and threw her a celebration party. When I won the regional math competition, my father was too busy with work to attend, and my mother suggested we keep it low-key since Jessica was studying for finals and needed quiet. "Don't be so sensitive," my mother would say when I pointed out the disparity in treatment. "Your sister just happens to be going through an important time right now." Every accomplishment of mine seemed to trigger a family crisis that diverted attention. When I was accepted into the advanced science program, my father mysteriously lost an important client that same day, and the family discussion centered around his work stress rather than my achievement. When I earned a perfect score on my SATs, Jessica coincidentally had a minor car accident that same afternoon, and my academic news was forgotten in the drama. My younger brother Ethan and I formed an unspoken alliance as the family scapegoats. 2 years younger than me, Ethan learned to keep his head down and stay off the radar. He was quieter by nature, which our parents interpreted as a lack of ambition compared to Jessica's outgoing personality. Together, we would sometimes escape to the local park or library, creating small pockets of peace away from the toxic atmosphere at home. The first major incident that crystallized my understanding of our family dynamic occurred when I was 16. After months of extra study sessions and late nights building my project, I won first place in the state science competition with a software program that analyzed weather patterns to predict microclimatic changes. The event was held at the state university, a 2-hour drive from our home. My mother attended but had to leave immediately after the awards to drive Jessica to her college tour. My father had promised to come but texted that morning that he was feeling under the weather, his code for a hangover. When I returned home with my trophy and scholarship check, my father was watching football with a glass of bourbon in hand, showing no signs of illness. "Good job, I guess," he said without looking away from the TV. Though these science competitions aren't really competitive, they just give awards to everybody these days. Jessica, who had returned from her college tour, picked up the trophy and smirked. The real scientists are probably saving their projects for national competitions, but this is cute for a high school thing. My mother busied herself in the kitchen. "Don't leave that trophy on the coffee table, Mike. And remember to write thank you notes to your teachers." Standing there with my achievement literally and figuratively diminished in my hands, something shifted in my perspective. I realized with sudden clarity that this pattern would never change, that no achievement of mine would ever be enough to earn genuine recognition in my family. That night, I researched college scholarships with a new determination to escape. UCLA's campus felt like breathing fresh air after years in a smoke-filled room. Thanks to my state science victory and strong academics, I received a substantial scholarship that covered most of my tuition. My parents contributed the minimum they could without appearing negligent to relatives, making sure to remind me frequently about their financial sacrifice. Moving into the dorms, I met my roommate Alex, a laid-back music major from Seattle with an infectious laugh and genuine interest in others. Within our first week together, Alex had asked me more questions about my interests and aspirations than my family had in my entire life. Our room became a safe space where I could speak freely, without fear of judgment or minimization. In my computer science courses, I found not only subject matter that fascinated me, but also peers who shared my enthusiasm. Study sessions in the library with my project partner Rachel became highlights of my week. She approached problems with creativity that complemented my methodical style, and our assignments consistently earned top marks. When I solved a particularly challenging algorithm, Rachel's excited, "That's brilliant, Mike," was so genuine, it nearly brought tears to my eyes. I wasn't used to praise without conditions or backhanded components. The distance from my family created space for me to recognize how abnormal our dynamics had been. Friends talked about calling their parents for advice or support concepts, entirely foreign to me. When Alex's parents visited and treated us both to dinner, showing genuine interest in my studies, I felt a confusing mix of gratitude and grief for what I'd never had. Holiday visits home became increasingly difficult. During Thanksgiving break freshman year, I returned with excitement about my programming projects and new friends. Jessica, who was in her second year of law school, dominated the conversation with stories of her prestigious internship prospects. When I finally managed to share my excitement about a coding competition our team had won, my father snorted. "Computer stuff is just glorified typing, not like Jessica actually having to understand complex legal precedents." My mother nodded. "Though I'm sure your little computer games are fun too, Mike." By Christmas, I had learned to keep my achievements to myself. I brought schoolwork to avoid extended family interaction and limited my stay to 4 days instead of the planned week. Each visit followed a similar pattern: initial awkward politeness deteriorating into familiar criticism and dismissal. The summer after sophomore year marked a turning point. Rather than returning to Portland, I secured a coveted internship at a San Francisco tech startup through the recommendation of my mentor, Professor David Thompson. Professor Thompson had noticed my work in his advanced algorithms class and had taken me under his wing, offering additional projects and invaluable guidance. "You have exceptional talent, Mike," he told me after reviewing my semester project. "Your approach to solving problems is intuitive yet rigorous, exactly what the industry needs." His genuine belief in my abilities was disorienting at first. I kept waiting for the criticism that would inevitably follow the praise, but it never came. Instead, Professor Thompson connected me with alumni in the industry and helped refine my resume for internship applications. The internship changed everything. Working with actual developers on real-world applications, I thrived in the collaborative environment where ideas were valued based on merit rather than office politics or family dynamics. My supervisor, Marcus, became another important mentor, teaching me not just technical skills but professional navigation and self-advocacy. When my parents called during this period, conversations were brief and superficial. My father seemed annoyed that I wasn't contributing to household finances by working a local summer job. My mother worried that living in San Francisco was changing my values. Jessica, upon learning about my internship, immediately mentioned a law school friend whose brother tried the tech thing but couldn't handle the pressure. By junior year, I had established clear boundaries around communication. I would hang up when my father started drinking and became verbally abusive. I limited calls to once weekly and deflected invitations to extended family events. These boundaries were met with resistance disguised as concern. "Your father misses you," my mother would say, though he never came to the phone when I called. "The family thinks you've become very distant," Jessica would report, implying I was being judged for my absence. My graduation from UCLA with honors in computer science should have been a triumphant moment. Professor Thompson had helped me secure a job offer at a respected software company in San Francisco with a starting salary that exceeded my expectations. My final project had won departmental recognition, and I was selected to speak at the smaller computer science department ceremony. My parents attended the main commencement but skipped the departmental event where I gave my speech. They left immediately after the general ceremony, explaining they needed to attend a dinner celebrating Jessica passing the bar exam. "We're sure your computer friends will appreciate your talk," my mother said, patting my arm. "And Jessica's accomplishment is just so significant, you understand." Standing in my graduation gown, watching my parents leave early to celebrate my sister, I finally accepted a truth I had been fighting for years. Nothing I achieved would ever be enough for them. The realization was both painful and liberating. As I turned back to join my classmates and mentors who genuinely celebrated my success, I felt the first real stirrings of independence. My first position after college was as a software developer for Horizon Technologies, a mid-sized company specializing in data security solutions. The work was challenging and rewarding, using my skills to create products that protected sensitive information for clients ranging from healthcare systems to financial institutions. My team lead, Sophia, recognized my potential and began assigning me increasingly complex projects which I consistently delivered ahead of schedule. Within 18 months, I received my first promotion to senior developer, along with a substantial salary increase and stock options. I moved from my shared apartment to a studio of my own in a vibrant San Francisco neighborhood, began building a social circle of colleagues and friends, and even started dating again after focusing solely on career for the first year. Most importantly, I started therapy with Dr. Sarah Winters, a specialist in family trauma. Our weekly sessions helped me understand that what I had experienced wasn't normal family friction, but a pattern of emotional abuse and scapegoating. Dr. Winters introduced me to concepts like golden child divided by scapegoat dynamics and narcissistic family systems that explained so much of my experience growing up. "What you're describing is not just strict parenting or typical sibling rivalry," she explained during one pivotal session. "The consistent diminishing of your accomplishments while elevating your sisters is a form of emotional abuse that can have lasting impacts on your self-worth." This validation was both painful and healing. I grieved for the childhood support I never received while learning tools to recognize my own worth, independent of family validation. During this period, my contact with family remained minimal but cordial. Monthly phone calls with my mother, occasional text exchanges with Ethan, who was now in college himself, Christmas cards and birthday gifts sent from a distance. My father rarely came to the phone when I called, and Jessica and I communicated primarily through group family messages. Then came my father's retirement party after 30 years at the insurance company. Despite my reservations, I requested time off work, booked a flight to Portland, and arrived with an expensive bottle of scotch as a gift, playing the role of successful son returning home. The event was held at an upscale restaurant with colleagues, friends, and extended family in attendance. For the first hour, everything remained superficially pleasant. Then, during the toasts, My father had consumed enough alcohol to lower his inhibitions. "And here's my son Mike," he announced, gesturing toward me with his glass sloshing. Finally decided his family was worth his precious time. Made quite a name for himself playing with computers in San Francisco. His tone made playing with computers sound childish and insignificant. Jessica smoothly joined in. "We're all so impressed Mike can afford to visit, considering how expensive San Francisco is. Though I imagine sharing an apartment with roommates helps cut costs." This was a deliberate mischaracterization. I had mentioned my studio apartment in previous conversations. When I attempted to correct this, my mother touched my arm and whispered, "Please don't make a scene. This is your father's special day." The pattern continued throughout dinner. My father made increasingly cutting remarks about my career choice, my decision to move away, even my choice of clothing. Jessica supported each criticism with subtle agreement or additional barbs disguised as concern. My mother alternated between nervous laughter and requests that I not take things so personally. I excused myself before dessert was served, returned to my hotel room, and spent the night questioning why I continued to subject myself to this treatment. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I called my father intending to address what had happened. "You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues," he immediately accused before I could speak. "Leaving early like that made it look like there's something wrong with our family." When I tried to explain how his comments had hurt me, he dismissed my feelings entirely. "You've always been oversensitive. This is why you'll never make it in the real business world, too thin-skinned." Jessica called next, ostensibly to help resolve things. "Dad didn't mean anything by it," she insisted. "You know how he gets when he's celebrating. You're making this all about you when it was his retirement party." When I pointed out specific hurtful comments, she sighed dramatically. "That's not what he meant, and you know it. You're twisting his words because you've always been jealous of our relationship." My mother's call completed the trifecta of invalidation. "Please apologize to your father, Mike. He worked so hard all these years to provide for us, and now this special occasion is ruined because you took everything the wrong way." I could hear Ethan in the background, but he remained silent, unwilling or unable to speak up, a response I understood all too well. That evening, I met with Dr. Winters for an emergency therapy session. She helped me see that this pattern would continue indefinitely unless I made a significant change. "You keep hoping for different results from the same interactions," she noted gently. "But based on everything you've shared, your family has shown no capacity for self-reflection or change." Over the next 2 weeks, I carefully considered my options. Limited contact had proven insufficient protection from the emotional damage of each interaction. I wrote out pros and cons of maintaining any relationship with my parents and Jessica, consulted with Dr. Winters, and ultimately made the painful decision to cut ties completely. I composed a careful letter explaining my decision. "After considerable thought and consultation with my therapist, I've decided to discontinue contact with you for the foreseeable future. Years of criticism, dismissal of my feelings, and minimization of my accomplishments have taken a significant toll on my mental health. Despite multiple attempts to communicate these issues, nothing has changed. I'm not writing this out of anger or spite, but out of self-preservation. I need to focus on building a healthy life without the constant emotional drain of our current dynamic. Please respect my decision by not contacting me. I've blocked your numbers and email addresses to help maintain this boundary. I wish you well, but I need to move forward separately." I sent copies to my parents and Jessica, but wrote separately to Ethan, explaining my decision and offering to maintain our relationship if he wished. I also sent a brief note to my grandmother Eleanor, letting her know I was well but needed distance from the immediate family. The response was exactly what Dr. Winters had prepared me for. My father sent a raging email calling me selfish and ungrateful before I could block his address. My mother left tearful voicemails about tearing the family apart and breaking your father's heart. Jessica posted passive-aggressive social media updates about toxic people who abandon family without naming me directly. I blocked them all as planned, and weathered the initial storm of emotions: guilt, doubt, grief, and ultimately, relief. The first holiday season without family obligations was both strange and liberating. I accepted an invitation from my friend Rachel, now working at a tech firm in Berkeley, to join her family for Thanksgiving. Her parents' genuine interest in my work and life provided a bittersweet glimpse of what family support could look like. For Christmas, a group of friends and I rented a cabin in Lake Tahoe, starting new traditions around the people who actually valued my presence. Through it all, Dr. Winters helped me process the complex emotions of familial estrangement, the simultaneous grief for what I never had, and relief from what I no longer had to endure. Occasionally, messages would come through extended family. My grandmother sent birthday cards directly to my apartment. An aunt would email with family news. And Ethan, once safely established at college, began texting regularly, our shared experience, creating a bond that survived despite distance. The most surprising effect of cutting ties was how quickly my career and personal growth accelerated without the constant undertow of family criticism. Free from the emotional labor of managing toxic relationships, I found energy for creative projects, deeper friendships, and eventually, the courage to pursue my entrepreneurial ambitions. Approximately 9 months after cutting ties with my family, I attended a cybersecurity conference in downtown San Francisco. During a panel discussion about vulnerabilities in financial systems, I asked a question that challenged the conventional approach described by the speakers. Afterward, a tall guy with glasses and a Boston accent approached me. "That was exactly what I was thinking, but didn't have the guts to ask," he said, introducing himself as Daniel Kaplan, lead security architect at a financial tech company. "Want to grab coffee and continue destroying their arguments?" That coffee meeting changed the trajectory of my career. Daniel and I discovered we shared not only technical perspectives, but a vision for a different approach to data security, one that was proactive rather than reactive. Over the next several meetings, we sketched out a framework for a software security solution that could identify potential breaches before they occurred, rather than simply responding to attacks. "The current systems are all about building higher walls," Daniel explained during one of our weekend brainstorming sessions at a local cafe. "But what if we could create something that acts more like an immune system, constantly adapting to new threats?" By our 5th meeting, we had moved from theoretical discussions to actual coding, developing a prototype during nights and weekends while maintaining our day jobs. The potential of our idea became increasingly clear as the prototype demonstrated effectiveness against simulated attacks that bypassed traditional security measures. 6 months into our collaboration, we faced a crucial decision. Continuing part-time development would take years to complete the product, but pursuing it full-time meant leaving secure positions and reliable incomes. "I have savings to last about 8 months, I calculated during our decision meeting. "Longer if I downsize my apartment," Daniel nodded. "About the same for me. We'd need to secure funding within that window to make this sustainable." The old voice in my head, the one that sounded suspiciously like my father, warned that leaving a stable job was irresponsible and doomed to failure. But therapy had helped me recognize these intrusive thoughts for what they were: echoes of past criticism, rather than accurate assessments of reality. 2 weeks later, we both submitted our resignations and incorporated our company, Sentinel Systems. We converted Daniel's spare bedroom into our office, working 12 to 14-hour days refining our prototype and preparing our investor pitch. Our first 5 investor meetings ended in rejection. Too speculative, too early stage, market too competitive. Each no tested my resolve and triggered echoes of family criticism. After particularly difficult meetings, I would find myself hearing Jessica's voice. "Did you really think you could compete with established companies?" Or my father's dismissive tone. "This is what happens when you don't understand the real business world." Dr. Winters helped me develop techniques to counter these intrusive thoughts, to recognize them as manifestations of past conditioning rather than reality. "Your family's assessments were never about your actual capabilities," she reminded me. "They were about maintaining the family dynamic that served them." Our 6th investor meeting was with Jennifer Wu of Horizon Capital, a venture firm known for backing security startups. Unlike previous investors who had glazed over during technical explanations, Jennifer asked incisive questions that demonstrated genuine understanding of our approach. "You're addressing a blind spot in current security paradigms," she noted as we concluded our presentation. "I'm particularly impressed by your adaptive response mechanism." 3 follow-up meetings and extensive due diligence later, Horizon Capital offered us $750,000 in seed funding in exchange for 12% equity. The validation wasn't just financial, it was confirmation from an industry expert that our vision had merit. With funding secured, we leased a small office in San Francisco's Soma district, hired our first 2 employees, both talented developers we'd worked with previously, and set an aggressive 6-month timeline for our minimum viable product. I took on the role of technical lead, while Daniel focused on business development and initial client outreach. The product development phase tested everything I had: my technical skills, leadership abilities, resilience, and stress management. There were technical setbacks that required fundamental redesigns of certain components. There were days when nothing seemed to work properly. There were nights I slept on the office couch rather than waste time commuting. Through it all, I discovered a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. Without my family's voices constantly undermining my confidence, I found myself making decisions more quickly and trusting my instincts. When I succeeded, I allowed myself to feel proud. When I failed, I learned without self-condemnation and moved forward. 18 months after founding Sentinel Systems, we launched our flagship product to positive industry reviews. A major healthcare system became our first major client, followed by a regional bank and 3 tech companies concerned about intellectual property protection. Each successful implementation led to referrals and industry attention. Our team grew to 15 people within the first 2 years, then to 35 by year 3, as we expanded our product offerings and client base. We secured a second round of funding, $4.5 million, at a valuation that made my ownership stake worth more on paper than I had expected to earn in a decade of traditional employment. Success brought external validation, in forms my family would have recognized: moving to premium office space in the financial district, being featured in industry publications, receiving acquisition offers from larger security firms. I purchased a modern condo overlooking the bay, drove a luxury vehicle I actually enjoyed rather than bought for status, and began investing significantly in retirement accounts and diverse portfolios. But the most meaningful aspects of my success had nothing to do with finances or status. I developed a leadership style deliberately opposite of my father's, focused on recognizing team contributions, providing constructive feedback rather than criticism, and creating a workplace where people felt valued. Our company culture became known for collaboration and innovation rather than fear and hierarchy. My personal life flourished alongside professional success. I began dating Catherine, a content marketing director I met through mutual friends. Unlike previous relationships where I had been guarded about my family situation, with Catherine I was open about my estrangement and the reasons behind it. Her acceptance and understanding she had weathered her own family difficulties deepened our connection. My circle of close friends expanded to include not just work colleagues, but people from various walks of life, who shared my values of authenticity and mutual support. We celebrated holidays together, supported each other through challenges, and created the chosen family I had always needed. Throughout this period of growth, I maintained my therapy sessions with Dr. Winters, though we reduced frequency as my coping skills strengthened. She helped me navigate the complex emotions that sometimes arose: the occasional guilt about cutting contact, the sadness during traditional family holidays, the anger that still surfaced at unexpected moments. Healing isn't linear, she would remind me. You can be thriving in your new life and still feel echoes of old wounds. That's completely normal. My contact with my biological family remained minimal. Ethan and I spoke regularly as he finished college and started his own career in environmental science. He shared family news sparingly, and only when I asked, respecting my boundaries while maintaining our connection. I sent birthday and Christmas cards to my grandmother Eleanor, occasionally including photos of my life in San Francisco without commentary. She responded with brief, warm notes that never pressured me to reconnect with my parents or Jessica, but let me know I remained in her thoughts. Invitations to family events came through various channels: an aunt mentioning my cousin's wedding, my mother leaving messages through Ethan, even Jessica attempting to reach me through mutual high school acquaintances on social media. I declined all of them politely but firmly, protecting the peace I had worked so hard to establish. Until, that is, the invitation to my grandmother Eleanor's 80th birthday celebration. This would be different. This would change everything. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon as I was reviewing quarterly projections with our finance team. My cousin Thomas's name appeared on my phone screen unusual, as we rarely communicated directly. "Mike, I thought you should know something," Thomas said after brief pleasantries. "Jessica has hired a private investigator to follow you." The statement was so unexpected I initially thought I'd misheard. "She what?" Thomas explained that at a recent family dinner, Jessica had boasted about hiring a professional to get the real story about my life in San Francisco. According to her, I had fabricated my success and was actually struggling financially but too proud to admit it. "She's telling everyone you're living in some shared apartment, probably working retail or something, but pretending to be a successful tech entrepreneur," Thomas continued. "She says she's going to expose the truth at Grandma Eleanor's birthday dinner." I felt a complex wave of emotions: violation at the invasion of privacy, anger at the accusations, and strangely, a touch of amusement at how completely wrong Jessica's assumptions were. "Thanks for the heads up, Thomas. I appreciate you letting me know." After the call, I canceled my remaining meetings and went for a long walk along the Embarcadero, processing this information and considering my options. By the time I reached the ferry building, I had decided to call an emergency strategy session with my closest confidants. That evening, Daniel came to my condo, along with Rachel, who had become one of my closest friends since college. I explained the situation as we shared takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. "So your sister hired an actual private investigator? Like with a trench coat and everything?" Daniel asked, half amused, half outraged. Rachel was less entertained. "That's a serious invasion of privacy, Mike. You could probably take legal action." I shook my head. "I don't want to escalate this legally, but I do need to decide how to respond." We outlined 3 potential approaches: ignore the situation entirely and continue no contact, confront Jessica directly before the birthday event, or attend the dinner and allow whatever plan she had to play out. "If you ignore it, she controls the narrative to your extended family," Rachel pointed out. Daniel nodded in agreement. "And a direct confrontation before the event just gives her time to revise her approach." By the end of the evening, I had made my decision. I would attend my grandmother's birthday dinner, my first family event in years, and face whatever Jessica had planned. Not for revenge or vindication, but to honor my grandmother and refuse to hide from false accusations. My grandmother Eleanor's 80th birthday was 6 weeks away, scheduled at an upscale restaurant in Portland. The invitation had come directly from her rather than through my parents, a small detail that touched me deeply. "It would mean the world to have all my grandchildren present," she had written in her elegant handwriting. As the date approached, Ethan called with warnings about family tensions and expectations. "Mom and Dad are being weird about you coming," he reported. "They keep saying they want to reconnect, but then make these passive-aggressive comments about you needing to admit your mistakes." "And Jessica?" I asked. Ethan laughed without humor, acting smug. "Says she has a surprise that will change everything. I think she actually believes you're a failure, and she's going to enjoy exposing you." I spent the weeks before the dinner preparing mentally and emotionally. Sessions with Dr. Winters focused on maintaining boundaries, managing potential triggers, and practicing responses to likely scenarios. "Remember that you're choosing to attend from a position of strength, not obligation," Dr. Winters emphasized. "You can leave at any point if the situation becomes unhealthy." Meanwhile, completely unknown to my family, Sentinel Systems was featured in a major industry magazine as one of the 20 most innovative security startups in the country. The article included photos of our office, statistics on our growth, and a brief profile of me as co-founder. This timing couldn't have been more perfect or more ironic given Jessica's investigation. Through Ethan, I learned that the private investigator had been quite active following me to our office building, taking photos of my condo and car, even attempting to interview employees under the guise of a corporate security survey. What amused me was knowing exactly what this investigation would reveal: not the failure Jessica anticipated, but verifiable success beyond what I had ever shared with my family. According to Thomas's updates, Jessica had been building anticipation among family members, telling our parents I was living in a shared apartment in a questionable neighborhood, possibly working an entry-level position somewhere, but too ashamed to admit my tech company had failed. My parents apparently believed this narrative entirely, telling relatives they were concerned about Mike's delusions of success. The disconnect between their perception and reality was so vast it had moved beyond hurtful to almost comical. The family who had never believed in me was now investing significant effort to prove I wasn't successful at the precise moment my success had become objectively undeniable. The day before the dinner, I flew from San Francisco to Portland, choosing a hotel downtown rather than staying with family as others would. That evening, Ethan and I met for coffee at a neutral location, our first in-person meeting in nearly 3 years. "You look good," he said, studying my face. "Confident. California agrees with you." We spent 2 hours catching up properly, sharing details of our lives beyond the text messages and occasional calls. Ethan had grown into himself during our years of limited contact, developing his own boundaries with our parents and finding his path in environmental science. Before we parted, Ethan asked hesitantly, "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" I considered the question carefully. Not nervous exactly. I know who I am now and what I've built. Their opinion can't change that. "Jessica is going to be shocked," Ethan predicted with a small smile. "She's been so sure you're failing." My last call that night was to Dr. Winters, a brief check-in to ground myself before the confrontation ahead. "Remember," she said gently, "validation from people who were never able to see you clearly isn't worth seeking. Whatever happens tomorrow, your worth isn't determined by their reaction." With those words in mind, I prepared for a dinner that would either change everything or confirm that nothing had really changed at all. The private dining room at Riverside Grill overlooked the Willamette River, the late afternoon sunlight reflecting off the water through floor-to-ceiling windows. I arrived exactly on time, pausing at the entrance to observe the family gathering already in progress. 15 people were arranged around an elegantly set table. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents, Jessica, Ethan, and at the head, my grandmother Eleanor, regal in a blue dress with a pearl necklace. Ethan spotted me first, his subtle nod acknowledging my presence before anyone else noticed. Then my grandmother looked up, her face brightening with a genuine smile that contrasted sharply with the frozen expressions of my parents and sister as they registered my arrival. "Michael," my grandmother called warmly, using my full name as she always had. Come in, come in. I saved you a seat right here." She patted the chair to her left, a position of honor that didn't go unnoticed by Jessica, whose tight smile couldn't mask her displeasure. My father nodded stiffly. My mother performed an awkward half-rise from her seat before settling back down, and Jessica merely watched with calculating eyes as I kissed my grandmother's cheek and took my place beside her. "You look wonderful," I told my grandmother truthfully. "80 suits you." "Flattery will get you everywhere," she replied with a wink before turning to include others in our conversation. The initial interactions followed predictable patterns of polite small talk, layered over obvious tension. Relatives who hadn't seen me in years asked superficial questions about San Francisco while carefully avoiding any mention of my estrangement from my immediate family. "The weather must be nice in California," my Aunt Margaret offered. "Much more temperate than Portland," I agreed. "Though I miss the greenery sometimes." My father cleared his throat. Mike certainly made his choice about what was important to him. The comment was designed to introduce the topic of my absence while maintaining plausible deniability about his intent. My mother jumped in with her familiar peacekeeping routine. "We're just happy to all be together for Mom's birthday. Isn't that right, William?" Throughout the appetizer course, Jessica remained uncharacteristically quiet, occasionally checking her phone under the table and exchanging meaningful glances with my father. The anticipation of her planned exposure seemed to be building towards some predetermined moment. As the main course was served, conversation turned to family updates: my cousin's new baby, an uncle's retirement, Ethan's recent job offer from an environmental research center. When attention inevitably shifted to me, I provided a deliberately modest overview of my work. I co-founded a cybersecurity company a few years ago. We're doing well, growing steadily. Jessica finally broke her relative silence with a carefully casual question. And where are you living these days, Mike? Still in that apartment you shared with roommates? The trap was so obvious I almost smiled. I have my own place now. It suits me. Must be expensive in San Francisco, my father commented, exchanging a knowing look with Jessica, especially on a startup salary. My mother added with forced brightness, "We worry about you out there all alone. The family business always has a place for you if things don't work out." The family business was my father's brother's insurance agency where Jessica had worked summers during law school, a place that had never actually offered me employment despite my mother's implication. I could feel the narrative they had constructed poor Mike, failing but too proud to admit it, probably struggling financially while pretending success. The gap between their fiction and my reality was so vast that I felt oddly detached from their attempts to diminish me. These weren't people who knew me at all. The waiters had just cleared the main course dishes when Jessica set her plan in motion. She stood, tapping her water glass with a spoon to gain everyone's attention. Her expression was a practiced blend of concern and regret that I recognized from countless childhood setups. "Before dessert is served, I'd like to say something," she began, her voice carrying the pseudo-sympathetic tone she reserved for her most manipulative moments. "As we're all together celebrating Grandma's special day, I think it's important that we address the elephant in the room." She turned to face me directly. "Mike, we all love you, but we're concerned. For years you've distanced yourself from family while claiming to be building this successful business in California. And we've tried to support your story, we really have." My father nodded solemnly. My mother looked down at her lap. "But family means honesty," Jessica continued. "And because I care about you, I felt it was necessary to get the actual facts about your situation." She reached into a large handbag beside her chair and withdrew a manila envelope. "I hired a professional investigator," she announced to gasps from several relatives. "Not to invade your privacy, but to help us understand what you're really going through so we can support you properly. I have copies for everyone." With a flourish worthy of a courtroom drama, Jessica distributed printed reports around the table. I accepted mine calmly, noticing my grandmother's raised eyebrow and slight headshake as she received hers. "I think once we all review this information, we can have an honest conversation about moving forward as a family," Jessica concluded, resuming her seat with the satisfied expression of someone who believes they've delivered a winning argument. A heavy silence fell over the table as everyone began reading. I sipped my water and watched their faces, particularly my parents and Jessica. For several long moments, confusion flickered across their expressions, followed by disbelief, and, finally, the dawning realization that something had gone very wrong with their plan. My father's face flushed dark red as he flipped through pages. My mother's hand went to her throat in a gesture of distress. Jessica frantically skimmed the document, her confident expression crumbling with each page she turned. The private investigator had been thorough, perhaps more thorough than Jessica had anticipated or budgeted for. The report contained professional photographs of me entering the glass-fronted headquarters of Sentinel Systems, where our company logo was prominently displayed, public records of our company's funding rounds and valuation, a copy of the recent industry magazine profile, photos of my waterfront condo, and the luxury vehicle in my designated parking space, a client list, including Fortune 500 companies, press mentions of our security innovations, my approximate net worth, based on my company equity. One by one, family members looked up from the reports, some with shock, others with barely suppressed amusement, and a few with what appeared to be genuine pleasure at this turn of events. My cousin Thomas caught my eye and gave a subtle thumbs up. When everyone had finished reading, all eyes turned to Jessica, whose face had drained of color, then to me. The silence stretched uncomfortably until my grandmother broke it with a gentle laugh. "Well, Jessica, I must say this was quite informative, though perhaps not in the way you intended." I closed my report and placed it on the table. "Thank you for clearing things up, Jessica. I've been fairly private about my business success, so this saves me the trouble of explaining." My tone was calm, neither gloating nor angry. I don't understand, my mother finally managed, her voice faint. You never told us about any of this. You never asked, I replied simply. And when I did share achievements in the past, they weren't acknowledged. My father, never one to admit defeat easily, attempted recovery. Well, good for you, making something of yourself out there. Must have been those business instincts you got from my side of the family. Jessica remained speechless, staring at the report as if hoping the contents might somehow change if she looked long enough. Perhaps now we can focus on what's important, I suggested, turning to my grandmother, celebrating Grandma Eleanor's 80 years of wisdom and grace. My grandmother squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes twinkling with something that looked suspiciously like pride. An excellent suggestion. I believe dessert is ready, a chocolate cake that I'm told is divine. As waiters entered with the birthday cake, the attention shifted away from me and the failed exposure attempt. Conversation resumed awkwardly at first, then with increasing normalcy as relatives processed what had occurred. Jessica excused herself before dessert was served, mumbling something about a phone call. She returned 20 minutes later with reddened eyes, but said nothing further about the investigation or its findings. My father attempted forced joviality, suddenly treating me as if we had always been close. My mother alternated between trying to take credit for my success, I always encouraged your interest in computers, and acting wounded that I hadn't shared more details with her. Throughout it all, I maintained a pleasant, dignified demeanor, neither rubbing their noses in their miscalculation nor accepting their revisionist attempts to claim supportive roles they had never played. The victory wasn't in proving them wrong, it was in no longer needing them to be right. As the evening drew to a close, I found a moment alone with my grandmother, as others gathered coats and said goodbyes. I always knew you would find your way, she told me quietly, even when they couldn't see it. After the dinner concluded, I expected to feel triumphant or vindicated. Instead, I experienced something quieter and more profound, a sense of closure. As I helped my grandmother into her coat, she asked if I could spare a few minutes before returning to my hotel. There's something I want to give you, she explained. We arranged to meet at her apartment in the senior living community nearby. When I arrived, she was waiting in a comfortable sitting room, decorated with photographs spanning decades of family history. I noticed with interest that several recent photos of me, ones I had included in birthday cards, were prominently displayed among them. You noticed, she said, following my gaze. I've always kept track of you, Michael, even when you needed your distance from the others. She crossed to an antique secretary desk and unlocked a small drawer, removing a velvet box that she placed in my hands. This was your grandfather's. I want you to have it. Inside was a beautiful vintage Patek Philippe watch, its gold case engraved with my grandfather's initials. Grandpa James never had much patience for your father's ways, she confided. He would have been proud of how you've handled yourself. I was speechless, both at the gift and the revelation. You know, she continued, settling into her armchair and gesturing for me to sit opposite her, I cut ties with my own brother for 20 years. This was family history I'd never heard. Really? Why? He was cruel, manipulative, always needed to be the center of attention, and would hurt anyone who outshined him. Her description sounded uncomfortably familiar. The family was scandalized when I stopped speaking to him. Back in those days, you simply didn't do such things. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp despite her age. But sometimes, Michael, protecting yourself is more important than maintaining appearances. I recognized what was happening to you because I lived something similar. I just didn't have the courage to step away until much later than you did. We talked for nearly 2 hours, sharing perspectives across generations about family dynamics, healing, and the courage to chart one's own course. When I finally rose to leave, she held my hands in hers. Don't let tonight pull you back into old patterns. You've built something beautiful in California. That's your life now. Will you come visit? I asked impulsively. I'd love to show you San Francisco. Her smile was radiant. I would like that very much. In the days following the dinner, the reactions from family members began filtering in through texts, calls, and emails. My parents attempted multiple approaches to re-establish control over the narrative and over me. My father called first, his voice carrying an unfamiliar tone of respect, layered over his usual authoritative manner. "That's quite a business you've built, son. Always knew you had potential. We should talk about investment opportunities sometime." When I didn't immediately engage with this angle, my mother tried next, her message laden with attempted guilt. "We're hurt that you kept your success from the family, Michael. After all, we did to raise you and support your education. Families should share in each other's good fortune." Jessica's approach was perhaps the most transparent, a carefully worded non-apology sent via email. While my methods may have been unorthodox, my intentions were to bridge the gap in our family. "Obviously, there was a misunderstanding about your situation. Perhaps now that everything is in the open, we can move forward positively, as siblings should." I responded to each with brief, polite messages that maintained my boundaries while refusing to engage in recriminations or debate. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm glad Grandma had a wonderful birthday celebration. I'm currently focused on some major projects at work, but wish you well." The most surprising development came from Ethan, who called to tell me he had finally confronted our parents about their treatment of both of us. "After seeing how they tried to rewrite history with you at dinner," he explained, "something just snapped. I told them I remembered exactly how they dismissed your achievements and favored Jessica." Mom cried and Dad stormed out, but for the first time, I didn't back down or apologize. "How did that feel?" I asked. "Terrifying. Then amazing," he admitted. "I'm looking at apartments in Seattle. Think I need some physical distance, too." "You know you always have a place to stay in San Francisco," I offered. My return to normal life in San Francisco felt like stepping back into reality after a strange dream. I processed the dinner and its aftermath in sessions with Dr. Winters, unpacking the complex emotions triggered by the confrontation and its resolution. "What surprised you most about the experience?" she asked during our first session after my return. "That I didn't need their validation anymore," I realized. Seeing their reaction to the investigator's report didn't feel like winning. It just confirmed we exist in different realities. "That's significant progress," she noted. "You went from seeking their approval to recognizing it's neither available nor necessary." My friends and Catherine provided additional support, listening to the full story with appropriate outrage and humor. Catherine, who had worried about the potential emotional fallout, was relieved to see me return largely unscathed. "You seem lighter somehow," she observed a week after my return. "Like you set down a weight you'd been carrying." She was right. Having my success acknowledged, even if through such unusual circumstances, hadn't healed family wounds, but it had removed any lingering doubt about my decision to leave. The experience had confirmed what therapy had been helping me understand. The problem had never been me. As the weeks passed, I established clear boundaries with family contact. I maintained regular calls with my grandmother, planning her visit to San Francisco for the following spring. Ethan and I spoke weekly, our relationship growing stronger as he established his own independence. I responded briefly but cordially to messages from extended family who reached out respectfully. With my parents and Jessica, I maintained minimal, surface-level contact, acknowledging birthday cards or holiday greetings, but declining invitations for visits or deeper reconnection. When pressed, I would simply state, "I'm open to a respectful relationship, but I'm not willing to pretend our past dynamics were healthy or to resume them." 6 months after the birthday dinner revelation, Sentinel Systems received an acquisition offer from one of the largest cybersecurity firms in the country. The offer would make me financially independent for life and allow our technology to reach a much wider market. As my team and I navigated the complex negotiations and due diligence process, I reflected on how different my life had become from what my family had expected or what I myself might have envisioned had I remained in their limiting narrative. The lessons I learned through this journey weren't about revenge or vindication. They weren't even primarily about success, though professional achievement had played a role in my healing. The most valuable insights were much more fundamental. First, that success doesn't heal family wounds. Even with objective, undeniable evidence of my achievements, my parents and Jessica couldn't acknowledge their role in our dysfunctional dynamic. The problem had never been my worthiness. It had been their inability to see it. Second, that some relationships cannot be repaired, not because forgiveness is impossible, but because genuine change requires acknowledgement and accountability that some people are simply incapable of offering. Third, that family is defined by love and support, not merely by blood. The connections I had built with friends, colleagues, and chosen family provided the authentic recognition and encouragement that my biological family could not. Fourth, that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential for health and growth. Walking away from toxic relationships had freed energy for building a meaningful life, aligned with my values, rather than constructed in reaction to criticism. Fifth, that peace doesn't require vindication. The moment of revelation at my grandmother's birthday dinner had been satisfying, but the real victory was in no longer needing that moment to validate my worth. As I look back on the path that brought me here, I feel gratitude rather than bitterness. Cutting ties with my toxic family wasn't an ending but a beginning, the start of a life built on authenticity rather than approval-seeking, on genuine connection rather than obligation, on self-worth rather than external validation. If you're facing similar struggles with family relationships, remember that you deserve to be valued for who you are, not diminished for who others want you to be. Your worth isn't determined by those who cannot see it clearly. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to step away and build a life that reflects your true potential, rather than staying trapped in others' limiting perceptions. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family obligation and self-preservation? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose their own well-being. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the family that matters most is the one that truly sees and celebrates you, whether related by blood or by choice.